Hello, and welcome to the special CBTV Thought Leader interview with David M. Walker. This is the first of several interviews we will conduct with key business leaders, government officials, and visionaries. David is the founder and CEO of Comeback America Initiative. In this capacity, he leads CAI's efforts to promote fiscal responsibility and sustainability by engaging the public and assisting key policymakers on a nonpartisan basis to help achieve solutions to America's federal, state, and local fiscal imbalances. Prior to assuming his current position, he served as the first president and CEO of the Peter G. Peterson Foundation. Previously, Mr. Walker served as the 7th Comptroller General of the United States and head of the U.S. Government Accountability Office for almost 10 years, from 1998 through 2008. David has also won numerous leadership awards, both domestically and internationally, and has authored 3 books, with the latest one entitled Comeback America, Turning the Country Around and Restoring Fiscal Responsibility, which of course was a national bestseller. David, welcome to Checks and Balances TV.
Good to be with you, Matt.
It's great to have you here. It's a real honor, as a matter of fact.
Glad it worked out. My pleasure. Good to be back in the South.
There you go. And you're from the South, aren't you?
Alabama. And we got a pretty good football team down there.
You certainly do.
Yeah, we
2
do.
years in a row, national titles.
3 out of 4 ain't bad.
That's very good. Good place to be from and be proud of. Well, let me ask you to get right into it. As the former Comptroller General and head of the GAO, what did you really learn about our government officials during that time period?
Well, first, of the civil servants, most of them are highly educated, very dedicated, committed to mission and serving the public interest.
That's wonderful.
But they're trapped in a bad system. You know, the federal government is organized and has operational practices and processes that are based on the 1950s. With regard to elected officials, we have too many elected officials that no matter how many bright and caring they are, they may or may not have had a real job before they got elected. And once they get elected, they don't have a real job, and they want to keep it for life. They live in a bubble, not the real world, and too many of them are concerned about keeping their job rather than doing their job. And as a result, we face a lot of large known and growing problems that get worse with the passage of time, and yet we have gridlock.
So these career politicians, is there any way to solve that going forward? I mean, how can we help our leaders or congressmen become more educated and more trained on what really needs to be done?
Well, I think where we are today is simply the government's grown too big, promised too much, waited too long to restructure. We have a republic, which is a representative democracy, that's not representative of or responsive to the public, and we can get into that later.
Right.
And so we need policy, operational, and political reforms. Yeah. And on the political reform front, one of the things we need is term limits.
Yeah. Term limits, like the president has a two-term limit. What kind of term limits are you think that they should have?
Well, the legislative branch is obviously different than the executive branch. I mean, the president is the chief executive officer, among other things, and has a lot more power than any individual senator or member of the House of Representatives.
Right.
And there is a learning curve. Yeah. So, my view is 12 years, if you had to compromise and go up to 18, then so be it.
Right.
It'd be better than what we have right now.
Yeah.
But I do think that we do need to consider that, along with redistricting reform, along with integrated and open primaries and campaign finance reform, in order to revitalize our democracy.
Yeah. I've also felt that it'd be nice if the people that served our country had to be in business in the private sector first and have run a business at a profit, so they know what it's like to actually not spend more than you bring in.
Well, of the 535 members of the Senate and the House, you're probably talking about less than a dozen that would meet that criteria. So I don't think that's realistic. And and after all, our founders intended that we would have representatives that were truly representative of the country. And so farmers and business people and with different occupations, if you will, that represents the fabric of America, because we really are the most diverse country on the face of the earth, and that's a real strength. But we do need political reforms.
Yeah, I don't imagine our founders really had in mind of career politicians being there for 30 or 40 years and kind of self-serving.
No, they clearly did not. In fact, most of our more prominent founders, including George Washington, also were very skeptical of political parties. And Washington and several founders refused to belong to a political party. And the reason being is that they considered political parties to be factions or special interests. And believe it or not, they were concerned that one day the duty of loyalty to political party might trump the duty of loyalty to country. Can you imagine that?
That's exactly what's happening today.
Well, they were visionaries.
They were.
And quite frankly, at the beginning of our republic, we had more than our fair share of great leaders. And today, we have less than our fair share of great leaders.
Yeah. I really kind of consider you a financial insider, although you said you live outside of Washington.
I live in Connecticut, so I live in the real world.
You are in the real world.
Yeah.
And having served there for 10 years as the head of the GAO and Comptroller General, you served under 3 presidents, is that correct?
I served during 2 presidential terms. I was a Reagan presidential appointee where I served as Assistant Secretary of Labor for Pensions and Health. I was a Bush 41 presidential appointee where I served as a trustee of Social Security and Medicare. And then I was a Clinton presidential appointee where I served during his administration and Bush 43's. But as Comptroller General, you're basically the Auditor General, the Chief Accountability Officer. You work for the Congress and the American people.
Gotcha. So, and I understand also that you were confirmed unanimously all 3 times by the Senate.
That's correct.
Is that the only person ever been confirmed 3 times unanimously?
I have no idea. But let's say between the combination of 3 times unanimously from presidents of both political parties.
Yes.
I don't know anybody else, but I'm not saying there's not anybody else.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Well, I really, as I study your career and what you're doing now with Come Back America initiative, I really consider you a true American patriot, almost like a modern-day Paul Revere, you know, saying, look, the future is coming, the future is coming, we've got to wake up, the future is coming, and we've got 2 roads we can go down, and we're going down the wrong road right now. Is that kind of how you see it and how you feel?
Well, Paul Volcker, former chairman of the Federal Reserve, who's one of our senior advisors on our advisory council, referred to me a number of years ago as the Paul Revere of this area. The difference is that I'm not talking about the red coats, I'm talking about the red ink. And I noticed that you got a red pin here too, Matt, so it's very appropriate. So.
That's right. Yeah, and it's as we all know, it's not a laughing matter, but we really have to get serious about fixing our fiscal deficit. And Congress, and it seems the president, is just kicking that can, and the can, to me, just keeps getting bigger. And they're not kicking it as far, but a couple months here, 6 months there, delay another year there. Where is it all going to end, do you think?
Look, there's absolutely no question that we're going to have to make some fundamental reforms to our budget process, social insurance programs, tax policy. We're going to have to reduce defense and other spending. And the question is, are we going to do it prudently, preemptively, phased in over time before we have a crisis, and without undercutting the economic recovery and our challenges on employment? Or are we going to wait until a crisis is at the doorstep where you literally can't kick the can any further, and we have to make dramatic and draconian changes like what they've done in Greece?
Right.
And that's obviously not a desirable thing to do. So what I'm trying to do is to make sure that we follow the first course rather than the second.
Well, as an American and a taxpayer myself, to ask me to pay more taxes, I can live with that. But I need to know that the government is living within a budget, doesn't have all these pork belly bills padded into one major bill, and that we really are using our money, government's using our money properly and spending less than they bring in. So I'm all for paying more in taxes if they will do their part.
Well, the truth is that 100 years ago, the federal government was 2% of the economy. This year it's 23%, headed to 37% on autopilot by 2040, absent a change. The truth is that 100 years ago, the Congress controlled 97% of spending. This year they'll control about 1/3 and declining. The truth is that our total liabilities and unfunded promises per taxpayer are $71.2 trillion, growing $8 million a minute, $350 billion a month. And if you look at our current levels of debt, federal, state, and local, based on honest and comparable accounting, there's only one country in Europe that has higher debt to GDP than us, and that's Greece. And I would respectfully suggest we don't want to follow their lead. So we've got to build a burning platform, and then we've got to figure out, okay, how are we going to get these career politicians to be able to make the tough choices? And my view is the people are ahead of the politicians, and we need to make the dynamic such that them continuing to do nothing is a greater risk to their political future than making these tough choices. Because most Americans are willing to pay somewhat more if they know it won't be wasted.
Exactly right. So we'll do our part if you do your part.
That's correct.
Let's work together.
That's right.
That's what it's all about. In reading your background, I found it fascinating that your ancestors came to this country originally about in the 1600s. Is that right?
1680s to Virginia.
Settled in Virginia.
That's correct.
Talk about that a little bit, about your heritage and your history.
Well, I've researched back my mother's side. I haven't been able to research as far back on my father's side, but it goes way back. And you know, I'm a member of the Sons of the American Revolution. I'm a student of history. I try to learn from history, learn from others. And I'm very proud that my family goes back that far. I have ancestors that fought and died in the American Revolution. I know why this country was founded, on the principles and values it was founded, and I'm very concerned that we've strayed from those. And while I have deep roots in this country, my wife goes back further. I mean, on her mother's side, she's a distant relative of Ponce de Leon, who discovered Florida, and her father's family, who came from England, came in on the second boat to Jamestown. So I'm a relative newcomer as compared to my wife. And she's a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution. But we care deeply about this country. We care deeply about our families. And we think that our present path is risking both.
Yeah, yeah, and future generations.
Absolutely.
And if I understand correctly, you lived in Mount Vernon Farms, Virginia, on land that was once owned by George Washington?
That's correct.
You must feel the love of this country through the blood of those that went before us on that land.
Well, no question. And I was also president of the George Washington chapter of the Sons of the American Revolution, and I've got responsibilities with regard to that organization. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. So take me back. I'd like to hear about when was the moment that you felt, and I'm going to use the word called. What did you feel kind of called to take on this monumental task to lead this charge to get America back on track fiscally?
Well, I've spent 21 years in the private sector, 15 in the federal government, 5 in the not-for-profit sector. And when I was Comptroller General of the United States, which I served as for almost 10 years, when I came in, we had surpluses in 1998.
Right.
And what happened was, for a variety of reasons, we had current and projected surpluses, and it was burning a hole in the pocket of senators and members of the House. And I was concerned it was going to burn a hole through the floor and maybe through the planet if they didn't do something. Because I know how Washington works, okay? Very myopic, tunnel vision, self-interest. So I testified in 2001 about the need to use modern portfolio theory to make decisions on balancing fiscal risk. Here, 12 years later, they get an F, an absolute F. Now, I spoke out publicly in September of 2003 because all the statutory budget controls expired at the end of 2002, and 2003 was a disaster, and it's gotten worse since then. So my really public outcry began in September of 2003, and it's continued ever since.
It seems like the government and Congress really doesn't have a firm budget they're living by. Is that correct? Talk about that.
Well, you know, as I said, I've been in the private sector, the public sector, and the not-for-profit sector, and my general view is you need to have 3 things in order to maximize success, mitigate risk, and ensure sustainability. Number 1, you need a plan.
Yeah.
Number 2, you need a budget. Number 3, you need outcome-based performance metrics to know how you're doing, are you getting better or worse, and how do you compare to your competitor or comparator groups. The U.S. government is a strikeout. 0 for 3, none of those, all right? And we wonder why we have a problem. Frankly, when I came to GAO, they only had a budget. They didn't have the other 2. We filled in the other 2 holes. And after 9.5 years, we were 13% smaller, 50 to 100% more productive, and 2 to 3 times the outcome-based results. What we did there with the combined efforts of people at GAO is transferable and scalable. We just need leadership.
Do you have an interest in running for president?
I don't plan to run for president.
I think you've got the right plan.
I had an effort to try to draft me through Americans Elect last time, and I declined.
I'll vote for you right now.
Oh, thank you.
Those 3 items is
so
exactly.
all we need is, let's see, about another 80, 90 million, and we got it made.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Tell me about your political affiliation. I find that it really matches what I believe in 100%.
Well, I started out as a conservative Democrat in the South when there was such a thing.
Yeah.
And then I became a moderate Republican when there was such a thing. And in 1997, I became a political independent, and that's what I am today. I'm a fiscal conservative, social moderate, believe in a strong defense, but also I'm an internationalist. I mean, we're not an island, okay? I mean, I used to be head of strategic planning for auditor generals around the world, 170 plus countries, chairman of the Audit Committee of the United Nations, and so I very much don't just look at us, but I look at our place in the world, if you will. And that's where I come from. And basically, I don't care whether you're a Democrat or Republican or a Libertarian or whatever you might be. I vote based upon the person. I vote based upon principles and values. I try to bring people together and solve problems. And I'm also one of the national co-founders of a group called No Labels, which is bringing together Republicans, Democrats, and Independents who value progress over partisanship and results over rhetoric. And I think people ought to check it out.
That's a great motto.
Yeah.
Great motto. I find that the media, especially, likes to put us in a red camp or a blue camp. Red camp believes this, and the blue camp's bad. Blue camp believes this, red camp's bad.
Kind of like the Civil War.
Yeah, exactly.
That didn't end up too well, did it?
No, and this isn't.
Yeah.
So
right.
I am what I call a red, white, and blue voter.
Right.
Just like you are.
Yeah.
We vote for the man or woman who did the best job to serve us.
Evidential matter, right here.
That's exactly
that's
right. That's exactly right.
You probably believe red, white, and blue.
I do.
There you go.
I do. There's no question. And we need more of that, where we're not hanging on to a political ideology, but the person who really is going to go serve us and hold them accountable. And that's another question. How do we strategically or on an ongoing basis hold our representatives accountable for what they're for?
Well, it's important because, in order for anything to be successful and sustainable, you have to have three things. The right kind of incentives to encourage people to do the right thing and discourage them from doing the wrong. Adequate transparency to try to assure that they will, and appropriate accountability if they don't. We don't have those. We're 0 for 3 on that in our political system, as well as our healthcare system and our K-12 education system, as an example. One small victory in that regard is just within the last 2 weeks, the debt ceiling was increased, and part of that was something called no budget, no pay, which No Labels, I'm one of the national co-founders, advocated. It's a very simple philosophy. If you don't pass a budget on time, you don't get paid till you do. All right? And it was frankly a bumper sticker version of what we were advocating, which is typically what happens in Washington. The name is not necessarily indicative of what they do, but it was a step forward. And basically the bottom line is, for the first time in 4 years, the House is going to have a budget, the Senate is going to have a budget, and the President's going to have a proposal. So then we can see where everybody's coming from and hopefully be able to start working towards some type of a fiscal grand bargain.
Let's keep our fingers crossed.
But we can't just rely upon voting these people out, okay?
Right.
Although we should, if they don't end up acting on the best interest of the country and future generations. And the reason being is because they've gerrymandered the districts. Of the 435 House districts, there's only about 75 that are competitive, all right? And so everything's decided in the primary. That's why we have to do redistricting reform. We ought to get rid of Republican and Democratic primaries and have one integrated and open primary. The best two people, the two that get the highest votes, run off in the general election. That would really change things.
Boy, that would. That's the strategy that's really needed. Right now, we're at a little over $16 trillion in debt. Is that correct?
About 16.5.
Yeah, and increasing.
And that lowballs the problem, because that doesn't count unfunded civilian and military pensions, retiree health care, unfunded Medicare, Social Security promises, a range of commitments and contingencies, such that rather than 16.5, it's 71.2, growing 8.2 million a minute, 350 billion a month that they do nothing, and they become very adept at doing nothing.
Doing nothing. Kicking that.
I kid saying, if only halfway, that if Congress was paid for performance, and that's the House and the Senate, it's not a partisan statement, it's divided, they'd owe us money.
They'd owe us a lot.
A lot of money.
And I want to talk about the debt. I recently learned, just a couple weeks ago, the Latin definition of mortgage is a lifetime of debt. I'd like you to share the story that I read that you had in a former book, IOUSA, where you talked about sitting down with your, at that time, 4-year-old daughter, Grace, and you read a paragraph out of the book Empire of Debt and her reaction.
It was amazing. And of course, she's got pretty good genes, but and she's a very sharp little girl. But I read her this paragraph about what was going on and how it was in effect mortgaging the future of young people and generations unborn. And she had a one-word answer. Oh, no, 2 words, I'm sorry. Devastating, Granddaddy. And this is a 4-year-old. She gets it. It's time that our elected officials get it.
Yeah. it's really a simple process if they are serious about making change. Now, change is hard. We don't like to make change.
Humans don't like to change, especially if they're close to retirement.
Yes, exactly. That's right. Don't rock the boat, as they say.
Don't rock the boat. Let me get off. Let me get off before you rock the thing.
Before it sinks.
Yeah.
But yes, if a 4-year-old girl understands how important this is, we as adults really have to make it very important and hold our elected officials accountable.
Well, and the way I look at it is, the federal government's grown too big. It's lost control of the budget. It's spending more and more on consumption, less and less on investment, more and more for seniors, less and less for young people. That's not a prescription for prosperity.
No.
And, look, we need to have a solution that is pro-growth, that is socially equitable, and is fiscally responsible. And it's possible to do that. The American people are way ahead of these elected officials. I've been to all 50 states interacting with them. We just need some leadership.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hopefully we'll get that.
I sure hope so.
Because
the clock's ticking.
We're going down the path. Now, I've heard you say that the American people are very distrustful of Washington, and I know that, I see that, I hear that as well. You said they're starved for two things, truth and leadership.
Right.
So how do we as Americans or citizens really kind of move our country and future politicians to truth and true leadership?
Well, one of the things you have to do is you have to do more than just vote, okay? Because the way that they've gerrymandered the districts, that's not enough. So we need to get these policy, operational, and political reforms. In my book, Come Back America, Turning the Country Around, Restoring Fiscal Responsibility, I address all three dimensions, policy, operational, and political reforms. The other thing is you have to understand that elected officials care a lot more about what people in their districts and in their states think. Why? Because they're the ones that can vote them in or out.
Right.
And so therefore, you need to be much more active in engaging with them in their district. Town hall meetings, in their offices, editorial boards, letters to the editor, op-eds, if you will. We need to have more boots on the ground and more people in their face in a respectful but an assertive manner. And ultimately what has to happen is you've got to make the political price of continuing to do nothing greater than the political price of making tough choices. It's as simple as that, because most of them, the primary thing they're concerned about is keeping their job.
Reelected. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Keeping that pension and the benefits of their position.
Yeah, retiree health care benefits are pretty lucrative. You get the gem for life, you get a number of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, our politicians up there aren't held to the same standards of some of the rules or changes that they make for the American public. Isn't that correct? That they're...
It's called hypocrisy.
Yeah. I mean,
it's good for you, but it's not good for us. Well, they exempt themselves from a lot of the labor laws and things of that nature. That's just not right. Okay. I mean, the fact is, there are a number of simple premises. Lead by example.
Yes.
All right. Remember the controversy? 60 Minutes, about a year or so ago, talked about insider trading and how the elected officials that eliminated themselves from insider trading. That's an outrage. It's an absolute outrage, okay? And there's a number of other situations, and now they've made some reforms, but typically what they do is, they're much more modest than they should be. People argue that, one of the biggest jokes in Washington is a congressional ethics committee. But,
they need to have some real ethics there to start with.
Well, they need to lead by example. They represent us. They are, and right now, unfortunately, the latest poll that I saw, believe it or not, I was shocked by this. I mean, I knew that Congress was rated low. They were rated below cockroaches. I mean, that's hard to believe. Yeah.
I don't think there is a floor below that.
Not in my wife's mind, I can tell you that.
Well, I believe also you have to lead by example, not by direction.
Right.
And
it's what you do, not what you say.
Exactly right.
Yeah. And especially with young people.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. Well, I have to say, David, that I was just very honored and blessed to have you write the foreword to my new book, All the Rules Have Changed. And to receive it actually on Christmas Eve was a great early Christmas present for me. So I really appreciate that. And I have to ask, I mean, you're probably asked many times throughout the year, throughout the months, to write a foreword for a new author's book or a testimonial or a blurb or something. So What inspired you, as busy as you are, to take some time out of your busy schedule to write a 4-page forward for this upcoming?
Well, the primary reason is because you're trying to help people help themselves, you know, plan, save, invest, you know, for the future. And that's very, very important. It's becoming more important because government's going to have to restructure. That means that state and local governments are going to have to do more. That means the charitable sector is going to have to do more, and that means that individuals are going to have to do more. And you know, bad news flows downhill, right? The younger you are, the better off you are financially, the more you're going to be affected. And I found that the way that you organized your book was, you know, very comprehensive. It was very readable, and it was, you know, it was impressive, frankly. And so I was happy to provide the forward to help people understand the broader context, that you really need to, you know, to heed this type of advice, because you're going to have to assume more responsibility for your own future. The sooner you get started, the better, so you can get the power of compounding working for you rather than against you as it is now at the federal level.
Exactly right. One of the things I talk about in the new financial reality is that we have 4 crumbling pillars. Number 1 is you can't depend on a pension anymore. Most companies don't have pensions anymore. Number 2 is Social Security. They're going to have changes to keep it solvent, raise the limits or lower the benefits. Stock market's only going up and down. It's really not making anybody a lot of money, and home equity is almost a thing of the past. So you really have to take it upon yourself to plan early and save money. And one of my big things also is to become debt-free as soon as possible. And I read in your foreword that you and your lovely wife Mary became debt-free for the second time in your adult life on December 21st.
That's correct.
Tell us, how did you do that, and how did it feel?
Well, you know, my family, my parents in particular, instilled in me, financial responsibility. Okay, and you know, I've always tried to look ahead. I've always tried to plan. I've always tried to save. I've always tried to invest to the extent that I had the ability to do so. You have to understand, I've spent most of my life as a public servant, so I've never made a lot of money for any period of time, and I was. You know, my grandparents who lived during the Depression and my parents instilled on me that, you know, you really want to minimize debt and ideally not have debt. And so it's a goal that I had. And when I went back into government the first time, became Comptroller General, I was debt-free, which is one of the reasons I was able to do it, because my pay was cut 85% from what I was making before, but I didn't have any debt. And then when I finally sold our home in Mount Vernon, Virginia, I was able to become debt-free for the second time. It's just a good feeling, okay? You know, you don't necessarily maximize your net worth that way, okay? On the other hand, I sleep better. And my view is that I decided a long time ago that I want to maximize my self-worth rather than my net worth, and to make a difference rather than to maximize income.
Very good, and very true. Being debt-free, as I am as well, that peace of mind is irreplaceable.
No, it is. That's right. But I do get concerned about the fact that I know that our federal government is on an imprudent and unsustainable path. I know that many state governments are too, and I know that many local governments are. So what I get concerned about is what's the future hold. I mean, for things like income taxes, for things like property taxes, if you will. And you know, because there are some common challenges. They've all grown too big, promised too much. They have huge off-balance sheet obligations for pensions and retiree health care that they haven't come to grips with, and they're going to have to restructure. And if they don't restructure, then taxes are going to go out the roof. And you could literally tax people out of their homes.
Absolutely, there's no question. One last comment about your forward I want to make, which is important for our people watching this to really hear, because it's a strategy you really have to be disciplined with. You say in your foreword that both you and Mary planned and budgeted money every month into different pockets or funds, as I call it. You had a fund for a home, for cars, for kids' education, retirement, and charitable contributions. So even, as you said, most of your life, you haven't made big money, but whatever you've made, you have saved some and put it in these different pockets or funds. How did you stick to it and become so disciplined to keep with that?
Automatic savings. Okay, I maximized the amount that I could do through my employer-sponsored plans, 401k or whatever. My view is that if you don't at least save as much as the employer will match, you're throwing away money. Okay, and ideally you want to do more than that. You know, if you're 50 and over, you're able to put in more money. I've taken advantage of that. I've not taken loans on it. I've not taken early distributions from it or whatever else. I mean, one of the problems we have in our system is a lot of people save, but they don't preserve it for retirement. And you know, in some cases, if they take it out before 59 and a half, they have to pay penalties on it as well. All right. So I've just, you know, maybe it's part of the German in me. You know, I've also got. My family's also from Scotland, so we can tend to be pretty frugal, you know. So German, we're disciplined, Scottish, we're frugal, and you know, it worked out.
I knew that's why I liked you. My last name is pronounced Rettick
in
German,
go.
So
there you go.
We have a common bond. But it is important to know, no matter if you make $1,000 a month or $20,000 a month, whatever it is, that you're on purpose saving money for upcoming needs, but also retirement.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, you know, the two things that I also recall is some people don't remember that they have to pay taxes. I remember when my daughter was doing her budget, she thought the numbers worked out just great, but she didn't consider taxes, and then she was deep in the red. The other thing is that people don't budget for charitable contributions. Right. You know, we have a responsibility to give back, okay? And you need to treat that as an item that needs to be budgeted for, okay? It's not, you're not giving out of, you know, whatever you have left over, especially when you're buying a lot of things that you want, you don't really need. Another interesting thing is that, you know, it's crazy how many people use credit cards, not debit cards, credit cards to buy coffee.
Yeah.
And I can assure you a lot of these people don't pay off their statement every month. So imagine what that cup of coffee really costs.
Yeah.
And that's just one example. There are other things other than coffee. But
well, you have people using credit cards for groceries now and for paying other debts, and it just mounts and mounts.
Yeah, and you know, look, debt, some level of debt is fine. Too much debt is not.
Right.
Too much adding at record rates is terrible, and that's where the federal government is. You know, if you're investing for investments, if you're investing for things that are very large purchases that by definition you have to stretch out the payments, okay, that's okay. Right. But too much debt as a percentage of your income, whether you're an individual, whether you're a company, or whether you're a government, is irresponsible. And they're fairly simple principles.
Yeah. This reminds me, in my book also I talk about when I first sat down with my boys after church on Sunday around the family dining room table, and we did a half hour of financial concepts, and they hated it, but they learned so much. And
but if you did it like I did with my family at Dunkin' Donuts, you know, it goes down a lot easier.
Yeah, well,
we do it after math for years.
So you got to, you know, that.
All right, but yeah.
But I would instill them that of every dollar I made, I only got to keep 45 cents that I could spend.
Yeah.
And they said, well, what do you mean? Well, 10% we give the charitable contributions off the top, not at the last top. I got to pay 25% approximately in taxes, and I'm putting 15% away for, first of all, emergency fund, and then it goes all into retirement.
And you live in a state that doesn't have an income tax.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Thank goodness, Tennessee.
Yeah.
So to really understand that, yeah, I get $1, but if I'm sectioning it off as I should, because those other funds are important, what do I have really left? And live within
disposable income. That's the key.
Yeah.
You know, spendable, bendable, as they say. All right.
I like that. Spendable, bendable.
What do you have? Right.
Yeah. And in the long run, I say that delayed gratification is never fun until you arrive. And then you're glad that you did have that discipline in delayed gratification.
Well, you know, it's you have to have discipline. Do you want to consume now or do you want to consume later? All right? And unfortunately, the federal government is not an example you want to follow. They're spending way too much on consumption, not enough on investment. They've got too much debt as a percentage of GDP, adding debt at record rates, and at least no clear path to resolving it in the near term.
Well, I'm so glad that you are leading this charge. You are our modern-day Paul Revere, and I'm doing everything as a citizen, an individual, and an owner of a financial services company to spread your message. And I guess the last thing I want to ask you is, what can we as Americans do today to really help change the future of America that we so desperately need the direction in our fiscal future?
Well, I'm going to give you two websites to check out. One of which is the Comeback America Initiative, which is keepingamericagreat.org. Keepingamericagreat.org. How can you be against that? And the second one is nolabels.org. That's the other organization that I'm a national co-founder of that I think you ought to check out that I mentioned earlier. You know, look, we the people can make a difference. And if we come together and if we get boots on the ground and in the face of our elected officials to make the price of doing nothing greater than the price of making tough choices to create a better future, we can turn this thing around. We can make sure that our future is better than our past. Thanks, Matt.
It's wonderful. Stay healthy, keep focused, and I'm right behind you. To learn more about David Walker and his fabulous organization, Come Back America Initiative, visit his website, as he said, keepingamericagreat.org, and become a part of the movement to hold our government officials accountable and to leave this great country of ours in good fiscal shape for our children, our grandchildren, and future generations. Thank you for watching this special CBTV interview.